I should start by saying that this is an extremely complicated and personal situation. I'll do my absolute best to try to tell it. Names and any identifying information won't be included here. I've struggled with mental health issues from a young age, and by the time I was 15, things had become unmanageable for my parents. They decided to send me to a lockdown school after my freshman year of high school. I literally woke up one morning to two strangers standing in my house, telling me I was going to a boarding school. They said if I refused, they would cuff me. So I went. After a wilderness program, I was placed into an RTC, or residential treatment facility. The school I was sent to was connected to several abusive lockdown schools in the US, many of which, thankfully, have since been shut down. The school was extremely abusive. Isolation, forced medication, physical restraint, stress positions, attack therapy, withholding exercise and food. All of this was common. The full story of what happened there isn't really the point of what I'm sharing here, but what matters is that the school took me, an already struggling kid, and made everything much worse. If I was troubled before, I was completely broken within days. I became a shell of a person and stayed dissociated most of the time because it was the only way I could cope. A couple of weeks after I arrived, a boy named James joined our unit. That's what they called our dorm group. This is where the story I'm trying to share really begins. At first, I hated James. He rubbed me the wrong way, and I went out of my way to be a jerk to him. But we ended up sharing a room, and over time, things changed. I started to become attached to him. We began spending a lot of time alone, bonding. I didn't realize it then, but I slowly started to fall in love with the guy. At the time, I identified as straight, so I thought of it as kind of a brotherly love. Though looking back, there were definitely signs that it was something deeper. As things at the school kept getting worse, James and I leaned on each other to survive the abuse. We were all the other had. We went through some terrible experiences together, and that trauma created a strong bond between us. I felt like I couldn't exist without him. He felt the same way. And we promised each other we'd stay together and continue our friendship after leaving. Thankfully, James lived only about an hour from my parents' house. Eventually, James was discharged. I was supposed to stay behind, but after a lot of begging and pleading, my parents let me leave as well. I called James the moment I got home to tell him. We started seeing each other 2 or 3 times a week, and for a while, it was one of the happiest times of my life. He was my world. He was the only one who really understood what I'd been through. But after a while, his parents started noticing how physically affectionate James was with me, and how emotionally attached I was to him. I'll never know exactly what led to what happened next. I'm only left to guess. One day, I got an email from James. He said he thought we should spend less time together. At the bottom, he added a little jab. We used to say we loved each other with 99% of our souls, because he said he couldn't give 100% since he didn't love himself fully. But in the email, he wrote, P.S. It's 72% now. I completely lost it. I grabbed the nearest sharp objects and slashed at my wrists, screaming and crying, begging for this not to be real. How could this happen? No one would ever understand me like he did, and I couldn't breathe without him. We saw each other a few more times after that, but everything was different. He was distant now. And the last time we met, he told me he wanted to cut off contact completely. That's when it all started. First, I called him constantly. I knew both his house phone and his cell phone numbers, and I would call all day, sometimes not saying anything, other times crying and begging for him to talk to me or love me again. I even started calling his parents, pleading with them. Then things escalated. I started calling his mom's cell phone, her work phone. I managed to get his father's work number and cell phone too. I called all of them, sometimes begging, sometimes just sitting silently on the line. I even manipulated a mutual friend into calling while I listened in, feeding her questions to ask. Eventually, they had to change every number in the house. Before James cut contact, we used to attend a church group together. I still knew where it was, and I knew that he still went. My girlfriend at the time, who was much older than me, would drive me there to try to see him. The first couple of times, he wasn't there, but I kept coming back, asking around for information. The third time, that's when he showed up. I approached him and asked if he really didn't love me at all anymore. He looked me right in the eye and said no. That was it. No. I broke down crying, begging him, making a scene until the staff asked me to leave. I'm sure it was humiliating for him, especially since he identified as straight as well. After that, I started having my girlfriend drive me to his house at night. I would sit in the car, staring up at his bedroom window. I did this at least twice. Sometimes I'd even have her knock on the door asking if James was home. Time went on, and somehow I managed to convince James to add me as a MySpace friend. It gave me hope that maybe we could fix things, though deep down I think I knew better. I saw that he had a girlfriend now. I reached out to her, pretending it was harmless, and I convinced her to meet me. She was a nice girl, albeit a bit too trusting, and that was something that I keyed in on. I got her to trust me and open up a bit. She told me everything. She told me James's new house phone number, his new cell, his MySpace password, even details about their sex life and families. I hacked into his MySpace and shut it down. Then I started calling his house again, calling his cell, screaming at his mom, gloating to him about how I had used his girlfriend. Once again, they had to change all of their numbers. Finally, after one last phone call between me and James, something inside of me broke. I was done. I knew I couldn't keep doing this, and I stopped everything. I feel terrible for everything I put him and his family through, and I wish that there was a way to apologize today. I'm sharing all this to give you a glimpse into the other side of stalking, what goes on in the mind of someone who does it. I was really sick, although that's not an excuse for my behavior. I'm lucky I wasn't arrested. There's a lot more to the story of what we went through together, but I hope this helps someone understand why people sometimes engage in this kind of behavior. Today, I'm a much different person. I still struggle with my mental health, but I haven't acted out like this ever since. I've worked hard to build a stable life, and it's taken years to get here. Hopefully, sharing this can help others better understand stalking, as well as the mental illness behind it. Several years ago, when my son, who's now 18 years old, was still a baby, I found myself longing for friendships. I became a mother in my early 20s and was the first in my friend group to do so, which somewhat alienated me from the rest of my friends. Not in an intentional way, just in the way that we didn't have as much in common at that point in time and our life priorities differed a lot. They would visit on the seldom occasion and gush over my son, but outside of that, our lives were just very different. During this time, a girl who was local to me found me on social media and invited me to this parenting forum that she belonged to that had some like-minded moms. It was really great for a while. I would get on there every day and talk to other moms. We would share recipes and tips on parenting. We did gift exchanges, and due to the nature of the forum, catering mostly to alternative-style parenting, we shared a lot of the same musical taste, shared posts of new tattoos, as well as similar senses of humor. We even split ourselves into local groups to do meetups and playdates, threw Halloween parties, met up at bars, without the kids. It was actually a blast at the time. Well, around then, a girl started posting on there a lot. She wasn't local to me, but she posted in lots of threads and quickly became well known in our forum. She said that she was pretty newly pregnant, if I remember correctly, and after a while she announced that she was pregnant with triplets. She seemed so incredulous and amazed by it, and we were all amazed too. She wasn't doing any fertility treatment, so it was a shocker, but we were all very happy for her. She had one of those personalities that was pretty big and made a lot of friends on there. People started sending her tons of things for the baby, as well as sending her money to help with the sudden increase in her family size. She posted pictures of her very large belly, and we all waited anxiously for her to give birth so we could see the new babies. Finally, the day came and she gave birth. I can't remember all of the details of the story she finally posted, But she said that she went into labor early and arrived at her local hospital, but due to the dangers of laboring triplets, she had to be transferred to a larger city hospital. She said that one of the triplets had died, one had gone home with her, and the other was in intensive care. A couple days later, she posted that the triplet who was in the NICU had also passed away. We were totally floored and upset for her. People sent her more money and more gifts, along with sympathy cards. Then the picture started. First, she posted a pic of her surviving baby, an adorable little chubby baby girl with a shock of red hair. Then she started posting post-mortem pictures of the babies who had died. I'm a registered nurse, and although I don't work in a NICU environment, I know what sickly, premature newborns look like. I think most people do, even without experience in healthcare. These babies looked identical to the surviving baby, just as healthy and chubby and full term. Only difference was, they had beanies on covering their hair, which she had described to us as being differently colored than the little girl who lived. It really just looked like her surviving baby sleeping. I remember that one of the girls on our forum, as a sweet gesture, photoshopped the picture of one of the deceased babies, making it look as if she had angel wings. That would have been right around the point where she posted a picture of herself right after giving birth holding a baby, while still in her hospital bed. Funny thing was that a nurse happened to be in the picture as well, and her name tag clearly had the name of the local hospital, not the city hospital that she claimed to have ended up in. Did this nurse decide to travel with her to a hospital that she didn't work at? I don't think so. Not only that, but since we were all very concerned about her, many of the forum members attempted to send flowers to the funeral home that she claimed the funeral was at. That funeral home had no idea who they were trying to send flowers to, and no other funeral home in the area was holding a funeral for her babies. It just didn't make any sense. The moderators of the group put two and two together, did some research of their own, and figured out that she was completely full of crap. She was pregnant with one baby, lied about due dates, and then lied to say that two of the babies had died in order to gain attention and gifts. Some of the moms who were local to her even went to visit after it happened and said that when they brought up the other babies, her husband just ignored it and wouldn't say a thing about it, as if he was just used to her being a pathological liar. Her huge belly picture turned out to be a manipulated angle of a naturally large pregnant belly of a singleton. I myself had a larger pregnant belly when carrying my son than my friend who had twins. The saddest part was that while this circus was going on, two of the moms on there actually did lose their babies. And while it didn't go unnoticed, it was sort of in the background compared to the triplet drama because those moms were not attention whores and were quietly mourning their own losses. One was local to me, and I attended the funeral, which was the saddest funeral I've ever been to. I'm glad that although I fell for the triplet drama, I never sent any money or gifts to this crazy woman. The group kind of fell apart after that. It continued to exist, but a lot of the members felt like their trust had been taken advantage of. Many of us felt guilty for paying attention to that squeaky wheel, while other moms were mourning real losses. And the overall feel of the forum just changed, even with the crazy lady being banned. It does make me concerned for her real child, though. If someone is willing to take pictures of their baby sleeping and post it online pretending that they're dead, what other things might she be willing to do for attention? Back in 2015, I was working as a live-in home health aide for a wealthy family. It was just me and my patient living together in a really nice condo tucked away in a quiet neighborhood on a golf course. We were easily the youngest people in the entire community. I was 27 at the time, and my patient, we'll call him Jake, was only 21. Jake had been diagnosed with a form of autism that needed special support. He also had sensory processing disorder, as well as borderline personality disorder, along with a history of substance abuse. On top of that, he'd recently gotten into some legal trouble and had been declared incompetent by the courts. Jake was a nice kid at his core, but emotionally unstable with almost no social awareness. He refused to consistently take his prescribed medication, which actually worked really well when he did, That, combined with his drug use, made him a pretty easy target for people who wanted to take advantage of him, and plenty of people did. Right before I moved in, 6 so-called friends of his came over to hang out and ended up staying for 2 straight weeks, draining Jake's bank account to fund their little binge of meth, coke, MDMA, and weed. They completely trashed the condo. Jake, who mentally seemed more like a young teenager than a grown man, didn't know how to tell them no. He just wanted people to like him. Drugs, in a twisted way, became his way to fit in and cope with his depression and anxiety. By the time I came aboard, things were finally calming down. It was a pretty sweet gig, if I'm being honest. I was paid well, had a nice place to live rent-free, and my main responsibilities were simple: keep the condo clean, make sure food was stocked, and help Jake stay on his meds. When I first moved in, Jake's mom, who was technically my boss, sat me down and gave me a heads up about one person in particular, a woman named Amber. She lived off and on downstairs with her father and occasionally stayed there to visit her 2 children who her father had full custody of. Amber was 37 years old, tall, thin, blonde, and honestly looked about 10 years younger than she was. If you passed her on the street, you might assume she was in her mid-20s. Jake's mom warned me that Amber was bad news. She was an addict, unemployed, no car, and always looking for someone to manipulate. She had a history with Jake too. Not long before I got there, Amber had asked Jake to borrow his car for an hour. She disappeared with it for 2 weeks. She was also the one who first introduced Jake to the group of people who trashed the condo. After that car theft incident, Jake's mom installed a GPS tracker on his vehicle that could even disable the engine remotely if needed. She told me she didn't expect me to play security guard, but if Amber showed up, or Jake went anywhere with her, I was to call her immediately. In the weeks that followed, I had a few minor encounters with Amber. She would randomly show up and try to talk her way into the condo or convince Jake to drive her places. Each time, I had to politely but firmly shut her down. No, you can't come inside. No, Jake won't be driving you anywhere. No, he can't go to that party. She never got aggressive, but she definitely didn't like me. She'd say things like, "Jake's an adult, you know. He doesn't need a babysitter." She was always trying to whisper to Jake when we saw her around the neighborhood, no doubt trying to manipulate him for rides or money. Amber always seemed a little bit off to me. Her speech was slow and spacey, and her eyes were wide, like she was constantly zoned out. She told me she'd recently been hit by a car while riding her bike, but later I found out she'd just been high on Xanax the whole time. That probably explained why she seemed so out of it anytime I saw her. Then came one night. Jake was out of town visiting his father, giving me a bit of a mini vacation. My best friend was over, and we were just hanging out, drinking PBRs, watching RuPaul's Drag Race, having a low-key night. Around 11 p.m., we heard a light knock at the door. I checked the peephole. It was Amber. I ignored it. But about 30 seconds later, she knocked again, this time a little louder. Still though, I didn't answer. She left for a few minutes, but eventually came back. This time, she was pounding on the door like a cop. I was getting irritated. I was off work, didn't want to deal with her, and definitely didn't want her causing a scene with my friend here. After a bit, she tried a softer approach, knocking and calling out, "Hello? Jake? I need help. Hello?" I stayed quiet. That's when I heard the door handle jiggle. She tried opening the door, but of course it was locked. I always kept it locked. That seemed to set her off. She started pounding on the door harder, screaming like something had snapped. I got up and checked the peephole again. What I saw is something that I'll never forget. Her eyes were huge, pupils blown wide, hair tangled and wild, sweat dripping all down her face. She looked completely crazed. I asked through the door what she wanted. She said she needed to talk to Jake, that he owed her money, and that she needed a ride to her boyfriend's house immediately. I told her Jake wasn't home and that I couldn't help her. She asked if I could drive her instead. I told her I'd been drinking and was heading off to bed soon, so she needed to get out from in front of the door. That's when she let out this frustrated, almost primal scream, punched the door before storming off. After a while, my friend and I went to bed, figuring that was the end of it. Well, the next morning as we're getting ready to go out for breakfast, I heard another knock. This one was the loud, distinct knock of law enforcement. I checked the peephole again, and like I was expecting, no Amber. This time it was a cop. When I opened the door, that's when I saw police everywhere. Squad cars, a crime scene unit van, as well as an ambulance. My first thought was that Amber must have overdosed or something. But when the officer asked if I'd heard anything strange the night before, I told him about Amber's visit and asked if she was okay. That's when he told me Amber was in custody for the murder of her father. He asked if Jake owned a crossbow and if it might be missing. The answer to both of those questions was yes. It had been missing for weeks. At the station, detectives eventually filled me in. Apparently, that night, Amber got into an argument with her father. When he refused to give her a ride, likely because she was desperate to get to her boyfriend for more drugs, things escalated. She used the stolen crossbow and stabbed her father repeatedly. Reports later revealed that she had stabbed him over 70 times, both with the crossbow as well as other various items. After killing him, she stole his truck but didn't make it far. Police had pulled her over on suspicion of drunk driving less than a mile from the condo. When they approached her, she told them she was speeding because she thought something might have happened to her father but wouldn't explain why. That's what caused the police to do a welfare check on him. Amber led police on a high-speed chase across 2 counties before eventually crashing. She was arrested and later indicted for first-degree premeditated murder. So yeah, that was the night my drug-addicted neighbor tried to drag me into her chaos, either just before or right after she had murdered her father with my patient's crossbow. Safe to say, I'll be happy to never meet again. I was recently reminded of this experience, and after reading so many other stories just like it, I figured it was finally time to share mine. Honestly, I don't know how people usually verify their stories on here, but I actually have some video recordings from that night if any mods ever wanted to see them. Yeah, shit got real. This happened back in August of 2017. I was 23 at the time, and I had just moved back in with my mom while trying to get my life a bit more stable. My car had broken down right around the same time, which meant I was relying entirely on Uber to get around. And because my closest friends lived about 30 minutes away, those rides were becoming pretty frequent. That night, I was at my friend's place helping them move. After a long day of lifting boxes, sweating, and rearranging furniture, we decided to unwind a little bit. We made a Target run, grabbed some champagne and a little orange juice, because apparently I thought a guaranteed hangover sounded like a good plan for the following morning's work shift. Predictably, by later that evening, I was doubled over the toilet with a migraine, throwing up everything I had in me, head pounding, and regretting all of my life choices. As I was struggling, my friend started scrambling, trying to find me something to take for the headache. Of course, nobody knew where any painkillers were, but naturally, the stoner friend stepped up and offered me an edible instead. Now, for context, I hadn't touched weed in years, but I was so desperate to feel better that I took half of it, thinking it might mellow me out enough to get through the night. About 45 minutes passed, and I felt stable enough to call an Uber home. My head was still foggy, but I figured getting home was my best option before things got any worse. Because my friend's apartment complex was like a maze, I had to walk to the front to meet the driver since, as usual, no Uber driver ever seems able to find an exact address. I got in the back seat of the car, and that's when things started feeling off. The driver turned around to introduce himself, and immediately I caught this heavy southern drawl. It was thick, like molasses. Something about him just instantly made my stomach drop. You know when your instincts start screaming at you? Yeah, that. I told him right away that I wasn't feeling great, that I had a headache, and I just wanted to get home. That's when he pulled out an already open bottle of water and some random pills from the center console, offering them to me like it was no big deal. I politely took them from his hand, but made sure not to consume anything, shoving the pills into the crack of the seat and tossing the water bottle into the pocket in front of me. Every internal alarm I had was blaring at this point, but because of the edible, I was still floating around in this weird fog, which, if I'm being honest, made everything that much more terrifying. We started the 30-minute drive to my mom's house, and very quickly, the conversation took a dark turn. What started as him casually mentioning he'd done prison time soon escalated into him telling story after story about the good old days behind bars. He started talking about conspiracy theories, claiming the world was going to end by the end of 2017. His tone got more and more unsettling with every mile. It wasn't just idle rambling either. Every few minutes, he would circle the conversation back around to his bunker. "You should really see it sometime," he'd say. "Fully stocked, enough supplies to live for years." And then, like it was no big deal, he'd casually ask if I wanted to head there instead of going home. Over and over again, I kept responding with forced politeness, saying I had to work in the morning, maybe another time, and trying to brush it all off like I wasn't terrified. Then came the real crazy stuff. He started ranting about how the earth is actually flat, about government cover-ups, and then dropped something about giants in Kandahar, Afghanistan. "I probably shouldn't tell you this," he whispered, "but look up Kandahar giants on YouTube." His pupils were huge, his speech jittery. It was clear at this point that he was either high, unstable, or both. Somewhere during all of this, he casually mentioned that he had an arsenal of guns at his bunker, along with the fact that he grows his own opium out there too. Then, almost like he was just feeling me out, he asked if I had any guns. My nerves were shot, but I managed to blurt out, "Oh yeah, tons of them," just hoping it might make him think twice about doing anything too bold. At this point, panic was setting in full force. I started secretly texting my friends, sharing my live location, and even started recording parts of the conversation on my phone. I got about 7 minutes of footage, though the whole ride was more than a half hour. As we got closer to my exit, things got even worse. We were flying down the highway in the far left lane, and he made no move to start merging over to take my exit. I kept gently reminding him that the turn was coming up. He kept ignoring me, still going on about his bunker and how safe it would be out there. Finally, I lost it. I started screaming at him, telling him to pull over, that my mom was waiting for me, that I had work in a few hours, like my job meant anything to this crazed lunatic, or myself. He still wouldn't get over though. In full-on panic, I started kicking the back of his seat and threatening to open the door and jump if he didn't pull over immediately. Finally, at the very last possible moment, he exited the freeway. When he pulled up to the red light outside of my mom's apartment complex, I didn't wait. The moment the car stopped, I threw open the door and bolted. I don't think my feet even touched the ground more than twice before I was inside the building. Once I got inside, I tried to explain everything to my mom, but she was so distracted by the fact that I had taken an edible that she barely seemed to hear the terrifying part of the story. The next morning, once I was clear-headed, I sat her down, explained everything in full, showed her the video recordings, and we both filed a report with Uber. I still use rideshares occasionally, but never again when I'm alone, and definitely never while I'm impaired in any way. That night taught me real quick how fast things can spiral when you're not in full control of your senses. And to this day, I swear the universe knows when I'm high. It waits for those exact moments to throw something like this right at me.